I'm on a couple minutes early this morning. I hit a big bunch of traffic here, so I'd like to go a little bit slow. I just, first and foremost, want to thank, I've had a few people kind of reach out and different things and say they appreciate this. First and foremost, for those of you guys that are new to watching this, number one, I'm a teacher and I've been a coach for a long time. Now I don't coach anymore. I got a lot of kids and a lot of family. But if you guys are watching this later on YouTube or as the kind of follow-up kind of replay on Twitch, appreciate you guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, especially on this one. I know it spurs up some things with some people. Usually with students, we get a lot of agitated conversations. Also with me as a former basketball coach, for a long time player, this has always been an argument. But today's topic and today's kind of point of discussion is greatest basketball player of all time. Now, I'll give a disclaimer. I'm 37, so I grew up at the end of the 80s era players. That's the Magics, the Birds, the Isaiah Thomases, the Dominique Wilkins, the Clyde Drexlers, Dr. J. I didn't get to see play a whole lot. That era, obviously I didn't get to watch the Oscar Robinsons, the Bill Russells, the Lou Alcindor college days. I got to watch the end of his pro days, not when he was in his prime. But growing up, I watched film on all of them readily. Just kind of a background for me, I played competitively for about 17 years. How do I want to put it? Played competitively for about 16 years. I coached for 15, 11 as actually 16 years, 12 as a high school varsity or assistant coach, 4 years as an assistant JUCO coach, and my main emphasis was defensive game planning and scouting of teams, and we always recruit. But with that being said, I've got a little bit of background in this. I've studied the game my whole life. Was not the best athlete growing up. I grew up in a town full of a lot of good athletes. But with that all out of the way, I was one that had to learn the sport, understand the sport, and understand nuances and dynamics and mechanics of players and different things like that to be successful. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to play the game. I would have got out-athlete all the time. I had to just play the game the way the game was designed. Now, that being said, right now, I know the biggest argument amongst a lot of younger players and a lot of younger kids and a lot of younger athletes is they believe either Kobe or LeBron are the greatest player of all time. Now, I'll give a disclaimer, another disclaimer here. I don't think you can decide this one. I don't think, much like yesterday I talked about the greatest game of all time, with the greatest player of all time, there's no real way to determine that. Number one, because a lot of players were deciding and did not play in common eras. Number two, the rules were not the same in each era. The play styles were not the same in each era. And the training going into playing in each era is not the same. The athlete's attitude and mentality is not the same. And approach to the game is not the same. What we value in each era is not the same. So with that being stated, it makes it exceptionally complex to determine this. Modern day, the biggest argument is LeBron beat Jordan, Jordan beat LeBron. I'll put it out this way, and to start the conversation. I grew up, Jordan was the man. Even the old heads, the Birds, the Magics, the Dr. J's, the Bill Russells, all those guys, Barkleys, and you name it. And you guys get on Barkley nowadays because you guys never got to watch Barkley play in person. Barkley, to me, is one of the most underrated stars of all time, just because of the position he played, the way he played, his size and his athletic stature. Really did not make sense to a lot of people, but that's beside the point. So I grew up in Jordan. I got to watch Jordan live. I remember watching every time that he could play, I watched him live, because that's what you did. Because when Jordan was on, you watched Jordan, because he was the man. And it's because Jordan would do things in an era that you just did not think it was feasible, possible, or probable. He could go off for 50 89. He can go off for 40 89. He could do a highlight play in a game that we'd never seen before. Now, fast forward to this year. Hey, what's up, Machismo? Dude, I appreciate you up on here. Starting to do something on my commutes in the mornings. I'm starting to do podcasting in the mornings. A video podcast stream without the games. The games are going to come at night once or twice a week. But I appreciate you up on here. Everything's good going on the East Coast. I know it's 11 o'clock your time. But I appreciate you, man. I'm just trying to get up on here more frequently with my crazy flipping schedule. And right now I'm sitting my little 4-banger on the freeway trying to get to work. But I'm up on here about a half hour every morning, so I appreciate you up on here this morning. But in topics today, so we're going greatest basketball player of all time, and I'm going to give it for disclosure. You can't determine this. For me, if I had to pick one, no, I'm not a road rage guy. I'm one of those guys that causes problems because I go with the flow of traffic. So you will not see road rage. I do it 100% safe if I'm touching and doing things because I'm trying to make sure I'm good. But yeah, no. So today's topic is greatest basketball player of all time. And with my background, I've got about 30 years of experience in basketball, studying, playing, coaching, you name it. But to me, it would be Jordan. But I can't even say that with all confidence, because I can't wholeheartedly say that Jordan is the greatest, because you can't compare him because he didn't get to play in this era. You know, for me, my feeling as a coach and as a guy that game plans and looking at the rules and the way things are placed, I think Jordan's points per game would be higher right now because of the way he attacked players, because the pressures he put on defense and things like that now. He would shoot more free throws per game, I feel. Because he attacks the rim a lot and you can't touch him. Or he would finish more plays because he's not going to get killed at the rim. No, he did not shoot a high three-point percentage. His percentage was low early in his career, but the three-pointer was new. Remember, the three-pointer didn't come out. The three-pointer didn't come out until 86, 84 to 86. 86 is where it became rampant. It hasn't become a readily used tool in the game until the late 90s. It wasn't a widely used tool. You had a couple specialized players on your team that would hit threes, but your mainstream players would attack the rim. They would hit mid-range jumpers. They would force free throws and different things like that. Kobe is the next iteration of Jordan. And to people that put it out there, and I appreciate your comment in there, is he's the next iteration of Jordan. He modeled his game after Jordan. He expanded some areas of his game that Jordan was better at. The one thing that Kobe doesn't get is a nod that Jordan gets is on the defensive end. He wasn't as considered as high of a level defender as Jordan. Jordan was really good off ball. Jordan was the type of guy that would make the defensive play that was big in a game and then go down and make the offensive play to score. To me, Kobe, and this is where I get a lot of flack from Jordanites, Kobe was a more of the offensive-minded killer, as a lot of people like to put out there. I don't like using the word killer readily, but he was more of an offensive-minded killer. He was more of an efficient shooter, especially later in his career. Now, Kobe had the beneficiary of playing with Shaq early in his career, which allowed him to develop parts of his game, because Kobe got to play with the big man. And people don't realize, because a lot of people nowadays didn't get to watch Kobe play with Shaq, Shaq drew double and triple teams, which then opens up a lot of the game and the floor for players like Kobe to flourish. Now, a lot of people do the same argument for Jordan with Pippen, but Pippen didn't demand double teams. Pippen didn't demand a lot of that different type of attention. But he did take some pressure off to where Jordan didn't have to handle the ball more readily, because Pippen was almost kind of that point forward position that LeBron plays now, that he could bring it up, he could handle the ball, he could distribute the ball, he could also score the ball, but he also was a good defender. Now, where a lot of people try to take credit away from Jordan is because Pippen is an all-star. Pippen is a defensive player. Pippen was drafted. Pippen is the product of Jordan's greatness because Jordan helped develop Pippen's mentality. Jordan helped develop what was already there. He just unleashed and pushed, poked, and prodded and pissed off something that was ingrained. The only way to equivalent Pippen to a modern day player is like an Anthony Davis type. Pippen he was a late bloomer. He was a guy that skyrocketed and developed his skill late because he hit a late development, late growth spurt later in his career. A lot of people don't realize. He didn't even get drafted out of high school. He didn't even get picked up by anybody after high school. If you guys watch The Last Dance, they covered a little bit, Pippen's kind of, his skyrocket is that he hit his spurt like later in high school, early into his college career, to where he was a team manager. He would play, he was at some low name state school, and then worked his way on. And then once he worked his way on with that growth spurt, dude just could ball. Now, keep in mind, dude could ball because that's just what it was. That's just how it was. He had this kind of mentality. He had a hunger mentality that a lot of modern players didn't get because he wasn't always great. Everyone, pulls the Jordan card. Jordan didn't make his team. He didn't make his varsity team as a sophomore because he wanted to make the varsity team as a sophomore. He was a little undersized. He wasn't what the Jordan we believe it to be. But sometimes you need that nudge, that drive, that nudge in life to become great. Now, if you fast forwarded to LeBron and bring LeBron's development and career into picture, LeBron, he was always, he kind of hit that growth spurt. He was always that unexplainable talent. He was always the bigger kid once he hit his early growth spurt. He was always the most athletic kid. To me, LeBron is the most gifted athlete, period. Like, the dude is 6'8", the dude is 265, and he moves like a lot of guys that are like 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", 190, 185, 200, and just does things that are undescribable. But that doesn't make you the greatest of all time. That doesn't put you in the discussion. It's what you do with what you got. I've coached a lot of guys at the JUCO level that are some of the best athletes I've ever seen. I've seen guys that are 5'7" do things that 6'6" guys that can't do. But it's what you do with your talent, what you do in big games, big moments, what you do with the spotlight on you that makes you relevant, puts you in that upper echelon. What makes Larry Bird, to me, is an enigma to most people. Larry Bird is a guy that if you look at him, he looks unathletic, he looks untalented, he looks like no one should ever speak of him, because in the modern era, people are like, who the hell is this guy? And he would not have the street cred. Now, what you guys got to realize about the 80s and 90s and the 70s, they talked way much more trash than guys do nowadays. They talk way more. They just did it under the radar. There wasn't all these cameras. There wasn't all of these, you didn't have YouTube, you didn't have TikTok, you didn't have Twitter, you didn't have all these avenues. You didn't have cell phone cameras to where you could pick it up and pick it up readily. They were also far more discreet about their trash talk. He also came up in an era, him and Magic and Isaiah Thomas and all these eras, where you had to be ready to throw hands. And that is what's different about this era. This era talks, but they don't do what they did in the 80s and 90s, even to some extent in Jordan's era, is you had to trash talk, you had to take a hit and be willing to get up and face a dude square to square. You had to be willing, a dude's going to throw on you, and you had to be able to throw hands back and still finish your game and play your game. Bird is considered to be one of the biggest trash talkers ever in the history of basketball, period. You go listen to old heads talk about Bird. Bird would come into a gym and do I'm dropping 30 on you tonight. And he would drop 30. And it's not because of my complexion or anything along the lines of those like that. I'm just going by what I've seen, what I've stipulated from people at that time. I didn't get to play against Bird. I got to watch Bird in person a couple of times, which is kind of cool. And I got to meet different people that got to play with Bird head to head and stuff like that in my time, which has been pretty cool. But people don't realize that a lot of people from Bird's era consider him great, because dude would talk trash, back it up, and people had no understanding for it. They had no idea what the hell would happen. Dude would come off a plane hungover, and it would just be the worst night, and he'd be like, dude, I think it was a Phoenix game. He's like, I'm going to drop about 30 on you tonight. And the dude banged out like 9 threes that game. And just was like, and dude would do little things, but he wasn't flashy. He didn't have the smoothness to his game, but he had the productivity to his game. Magic, same deal, but dude had a smoothness to his game. He had and see, you had Bird was kind of like the get the job done type mentality, where he would drop 30 and win championships and games and stuff like that, and just kind of cutthroat in his own right, but he didn't look it. Magic was the same way, but Magic was the smooth talking, trash talking individual that drove people nuts, because he would be beating you and he would smile at you. He would talk shit and he would smile at you, excuse my language. And so people have a hard time with Magic. But what makes these guys great and puts them in the discussion is when the game was on the line, they made big plays. When the game is on the line, Magic's taking the shot. When the game's on the line, Bird's making the shot. When the game's on the line, Jordan's getting the steal and making the defensive play, and then going and hitting the game winner down on the other end. And that's what people don't realize. Kobe, to some extent, did not have those moments, but he had those shots and those great hits and those great moments. LeBron, early in his career, would have great stat games, impressive side games, and different things like that. But he didn't have the moment, the shot, the thing where we can point to and be like, damn. And it gets into the argument, and you bring Bill Russell into play. I mean, 13 championships. I think it was 2 as a player coach. That's unheard of back in the day. And so what's hard is when you're comparing these areas, Jordan played against, guys that, they in the summer were delivery men and different things and stuff like that. But they did things in the game that modern day players wouldn't do. These guys that they trash talk about, they were postal workers, guys off the street and stuff like that. They were also the same guys that would go up and literally elbow the hell out of Jordan in midair and knock him on his ass. And you don't do that in the modern era, because modern era, that's an automatic ejection, fine, multiple game suspension. In that era, it's a flagrant foul, but the guy's still going to get to play. And so what happens is LeBron doesn't have to take the contact that players, and it wasn't just Jordan, a lot of players in that era had to literally get punched, elbowed, kneed, thrown, hit, socked, get to the rim. And, when you see these video clips, there's a lot of times Jordan went to the rim and he wasn't touched. But these guys are picking out, remember, Jordan played 82 games. Readily. There was literally the one season, the one where he came back from not playing because he sat out a year and a half, and scandal and gambling and all this different type of crap. Guys, all these professional athletes got issues beyond a reasonable doubt. So don't lie to yourself that all these guys are above board and great. They all have issues. Nowadays, they just have more ways and more money to hide it. Back then, same deal too. They just didn't have social media and all that stuff to hide it. But the game style nowadays doesn't allow for these hits and these drops, and or like guy drops you and you know it's intentional. They've been doing it all game. They get up, start swinging on guys. They'd be back the next game. Modern day, you do that, you're out at least 4 or 5 games, maybe even half a season if you throw hands. And a lot of that came out of the Indiana issue. Obviously, the Ron Artest, Jermaine O'Neal kind of incident that happened in Indiana Fieldhouse that really changed NBA's approach to it, because, hey, the game was getting too violent. The game was getting to the point where it was becoming unwatchable. Now you can say it's bad basketball, you can say it is what it is, but that's just the nature of the game. Like, you can only play the game in the way the rules are called in front of you. And for Jordan's era, and I grew up in that era, you could put 2 hands on a guy and defend him. You could hold a guy dribbling the ball. You could literally mug a guy, commit assault, and it was considered 100% legal. You can't touch guys nowadays. And I think LeBron would have been fine in that era because he was strong enough with the ball. He's a physical specimen that could have handled the ball. I don't know. LeBron wouldn't be the same player that you see today. He would not be this smiley, gloaty, kind of individual, floppy guy that people don't like when it comes down to that. Now, the modern era with basketball is like, it's like politics. Half the people love LeBron, half the people hate LeBron. People from my era that grow up that have a hard time with LeBron is he's a product of the way the game's gotten because of the European style infecting in, soccer style, and the way that the officials are calling the game is they were getting sold. You know, when LeBron flops, and they practice this, when you even feel remote view or they're in a position where it looks like they could get hit, they've been trained over time to sell it because it's been effective and they've gotten calls. And so he's a product of that over decades. I mean, the dude's a year younger than me. He's 30. He's literally my age. He graduated high school literally a year after me. So I got to I grew up playing ball in an era where this guy's getting covered on ESPN, which was kind of interesting for me to see because that didn't happen before. And so LeBron is infinitely more recognizable nowadays because of social media, because they covered his games back then. Back then you didn't know about guys. Like, Jordan wasn't a known commodity. Like, until some people started seeing him play, and then he goes to a college camp, and then it's like, oh, this guy's good. I mean, Roy Williams' explanation of when they saw him at camp was like, I think we got the greatest player in the freaking country right now, and no one knew about that until the dude stepped foot in camp. Nowadays, because of the way things are covered and different things like that, it's more recognizable. So when you get into the argument, I mean, a lot of people, it comes down to Jordan and LeBron. And, you know, you bring championships in. Yeah, Jordan never lost in the finals. And, you know, you can make all the excuses you want. He played a battered this and a battered that and a John Stockton group this and that. And LeBron played this, and this. Okay, you can tit for tat it all you want. Jordan played in a harder Eastern Conference than LeBron ever did. LeBron only had to play a tough team when you got to the Eastern Conference Finals. And that was Boston because the Big Three sprouted up. Right? And then he left and he paired up with some other guys because he realized he wasn't getting the draft picks that you need to be able to build a team. And then it became free agency madness. Now, we've had super teams in the past, but the difference was a lot of those super teams, you only traded for one individual. You didn't get all three guys to come together in one spot. And so that's what makes it different for that type of saga. That's what makes it really complex when you're judging LeBron's era to Jordan's era. Jordan, they traded away one player that really put him up over the top. They drafted a lot of these guys. Okay, Pippen was drafted. Paxton was drafted. All these guys were drafted that were brought in. Okay, and so they built a franchise. Back then, you built franchises because free agency wasn't as rampant as it is nowadays. The Bronze era, you kind of had to build. The only equivalent team that you can even equate to kind of what happened in the 90s with a lot of those decade teams, which is why they're winning, is you have Toronto. They drafted most of those players, and then they got Kawhi. The Warriors drafted the core of their team, and they got Durant, but they won one, and they got a couple of trades. You know, they had to get rid of Ellis because Ellis wasn't fitting what they were doing. They had to get a more cohesive team, which is why they went out and got Bogut. And you can say what you want about Bogut, but he was, between him and all the draft picks that they got and getting Iguodala, you know, but these guys that they got weren't their main guys. They fit within the system. And that would be the equivalent. Milwaukee's the same thing. All those guys were drafted, kind of the core part of their team, except for, and they, you know, they picked up a couple guys here and there, but Jrue Holiday was kind of the main trade that made him successful. But they didn't trade everybody into a super team. LeBron gets a lot of discredit because he doesn't go with drafted teams. His successes come from free agent madness teams, but they're a flash in the pan. They're not sustainable long term. So that's kind of where these things kind of get messy. Kobe came up in that last era where you did that. Kobe and Shaq. Shaq wasn't drafted, but he was traded for, but everybody pieced around him was drafted and kind of pieced together slowly. It wasn't in an instant. So that's where it gets kind of hard. You know, the rule difference is that people don't understand because they didn't play in that era. Yeah, they may not have been as athletic as the modern era, but the physicality and the beating on your body that you don't realize, because I played with it. I wasn't the most athletic because I was a shooter, because I was a scorer. I was going to get hit every time on defense. Every time I was in the paint, guys knew in their game plan to take shots at you to try to slow down your ability to score. I was a shooter, so you try to take out my legs. You would try to do different things. Hell, every time I went up to shoot a shot, I either got hit in the nuts or got punched in the stomach to try to take away from it, and it didn't get called a lot of times because referees weren't looking for it. And so that's kind of what went on in Jordan's era. LeBron's era, what makes things complicated is a lot of guys are one-track mind and one-track skill set. And they're not as multi-tooled as some of the guys had to be in a different area. And you had that in a different era. But nowadays, how it kind of works is, you know, I'm LeBron, you're going to play with me, you're a shooter, you're sitting in the corners. Because I'm going to draw 2 or 3 guys, and I'm just going to throw the ball to wherever. And you just be ready to shoot and score. And the thing that gives me a one-up to Jordan over LeBron is that Jordan elevated players to another level. Jordan elevated Scotty's game. Scotty had the ability to be great, but Scotty at the same time needed that nudge, needed that push, needed that accountability to be great, and Jordan was that. And everybody, but Jordan also pushed other role players to hit big shots in big moments. You know, the biggest thing is, you know, Steve Kerr, and Steve Kerr is a great shooter. Yeah, he was. And Steve Kerr was one of the biggest competitors. Yeah, he was. But also in practice, Jordan would push guys to the point where they would stand up and fight and defend themselves. And I don't feel that same way with when you watch LeBron. Is look at all the players that have played with him. They have not gotten better. They have not increased. Kyrie's game didn't increase. It was the same. If anything, he's hurt most of the time. Which the only guy I can really equate that he really elevated within his game, Tristan Thompson. And he got the dude paid. You know, Mike Miller was always a great three-point shooter. Shane Battier was always a spot-up three-point shooter. Ray Allen was always that guy. Dwayne Wade was that man. Dwayne Wade had to carry him in that first championship. And I think that's where LeBron gets some shade, which is kind of rough, is that because of what happened early in Miami, where Dwayne really kind of carried that first. And see, Dwayne Wade, what people don't realize, Dwayne Wade won one without LeBron. LeBron needed that secondary guy to help make him kind of that scorer. And so And he really kind of helped LeBron understand how to win because of how he played in that series when they won their first one. He really helped him. And LeBron was frustrated after 2011 with the Dallas series, to where he really elevated his play after that. And it was amazing to watch him play. You know, what he did in the series with Cleveland against Golden State, and, you know, full confession, I grew up a Sacramento and Golden State fan. That was hella impressive. Like, just unreal. Problem is, and LeBron realized this, it's hard to win championships because it's a sum of the parts. There's a lot of things that go in winning championships. It's health. It's role players playing big. Role players determine championships more than anything, but role players are dependent upon the great players that they play with to allow them to flourish within what they do well. And the one that he got in Cleveland, you know, Game 5, he baited Draymond, and to his credit, he knew what he was doing. He's not stupid. He's one of the most IQ heavy people out there. But outside of that, you know, you look at the championship in LA, he got 3 months of rest. And, you know, you can equate it to all these different things nowadays. These guys get more rest than they got back in the day. Now, the problem that these guys have, which really causes these guys to break down and get injured more, you have more non-contact injuries in this day and age. They have more miles on their body by the time they're in the NBA than guys did from the 80s and 90s because of how much ball they play between AAU and all these different dynamics. By the time they get to the pro level in all these years, their bodies are more worn out. And you're getting more non-contact injuries because they don't rest their bodies as much growing up as they used to. So you get these ACLs and these MCLs and these complete blowouts and back spasms and stuff readily, and mental health burnout and different things and stuff like that, which I'm glad guys like Kevin Love and all these DeMar DeRozan and all these different guys and Kawhi talked about mental health, is these guys are burnt out. And in Jordan's era, they didn't do that as much. Hell, some guys had to go work secondary jobs in the summertime because they didn't pay what they did back in the NBA. You thank Jordan for that. But that's where they get a lot of discredit, and you compare the areas, it makes it hard. Now, to me, when I watched Jordan and I've watched LeBron play, and unfortunately for LeBron, my view gets tainted a little bit, and I wish it didn't. I can watch it in a bubble. Is at the end of the game, I know Jordan's going to take the shot. I know Jordan's going to hit the shot, or if not, he's going to get it back in the next game because he always did. Which is why, you know, you go watch his series against the Pacers in his last kind of run. Reggie Miller hits the go-ahead shot, and remember the rules are different. He hella pushed off and ran off, but you could do that. I remember doing that as shooters. You could push, shove, and really shove guys off because guys could mug you. They kind of let it go. And he hits the shot. Reggie Miller does. Fast forward, you go to the next spot. Jordan actually almost hit a shot. Literally, the thing rattled it out right after Reggie Miller hits that. They go next game. His defense, they grind it out and they beat him in the next game. And then they go off to Utah. And I think what really symbolizes Jordan, which is the difference from Jordan and LeBron, is go watch Game 6 of the 97 series with Utah in the last minute. And you watch, I would say, LeBron's high point is the block against Golden State, which is a hell of a block. But who has to hit the game winner to seal it to beat the Warriors? Kyrie hits it. If LeBron hits that block and then he comes down and hits the game winner on the other end, people start looking at LeBron at Jordan's level. But because he made the block and he doesn't come down and hit the shot, it doesn't have that same allure when you have Jordan go and rip Karl Malone because he read the play. He knew what was happening. He knew what was going on. He just had the instincts to go double, leave his guy wide open, who was a decent scorer, to go rip Karl Malone, not give the ball up, and is like, I'm hitting this. And yeah, he pushed off Brian Russell, but as much as LeBron gets the flop call, it's the same thing as Jordan gets the push-off call. Now, the one thing that I like that's a little bit different from that era is, yeah, Jordan got the push-off call. You saw he had hit the damn shot. And he goes and he hits the shot, and it wasn't even a question. He knew it before it released. Everyone in the gym knew it before it released, and that's that. If LeBron had that same moment that Jordan has, I feel this discussion gets more heated. I can't say Jordan's the greatest player of all time, but what I can say are there's those moments there that makes it hard for Jordanites to accept LeBron as better, and there's those moments that the stats and the freak nature, athletic ability, and the size and the stature, and LeBron looks like the greatest guy of all time, that those LeBronites have a hard time giving Jordan the kind of nod. Jordan even said himself, dude, it's different decades. You can't compare him. He said LeBron's great. He said all these different things. Even people from all the different eras, they've said it. But it's those moments that change how we perceive the greatest players of all time. Now, that doesn't mean that Jordan is better than LeBron. It's a freak thing to go to that many finals in a row. Like, that's just unheard of, regardless of how weak the team is and all different types of stuff like that. Now, if he would have played the full games each season, I think Jordanites would give him more of a tip and a nod. It's the mentality that LeBron approaches the game, but he's a product of the mentality of nowadays. So that's what kind of makes everything, it just kind of taints everything back and forth. For me, you can't compare them. I just, as basketball, enjoy watching it and loving it and all those different types of things and stuff like that. Just enjoy it. Basketball is a beautiful game. Now, what you see with basketball is it's trying to get back to more of a believable, more of a what the game is meant to be mentality, which is why I think people are having a hard time with it, is that